Today, we become legends.
Today's Titan Talk recap had a more in-depth look at the item balance changes we saw in the flash test, as well as god balance and some Q&A. So without further ado, let's jump into today's Titan Talk recap. First up, today's Titan Talk went over the OB9 balance that we got a sneak peek at via the flash test, and there's a ton of sweeping balance changes to items coming in this patch. Clumsy started by explaining that this is sort of the end of the saga of balance changes that they were shipping over the course of OB7, 8, and 9 towards item specialization and stat removal, which is why the percent pen changes are being made this patch. They're sort of the last holdover from the item specialization that weren't touched in OB8. Firstly, percent penetration is gone as a stat on items. It's now going to be exclusive to passives like shattering or piercing, so any tier 2 and tier 3 item that had percent penetration on it has been removed, with the one exception of void shard that builds into the percent pen items, and this item is now unique, so you can't purchase more than one of them at a time to prevent builds that would just stack these and bypass the percent pen changes. Those percent pen changes are that Titans made an obsidian shard have been increased to 35% penetration and are now your one-stop shop for percent pen and ability-based builds. And these still don't stack with each other. Totem of Death is getting more intelligence and cooldown rate and now has 5 max stacks instead of 4, meaning its maximum percent pen went from 24% to 30. Executioner is getting the same change, 5 max stacks instead of 4, and it now gives either strength or intelligence based on which is higher in your build, and Demonic Grip has been removed from the game as it's no longer needed with this Executioner change. I'll quickly go over the individual changes to the items that had their percent pen removed, but the general idea is that percent pen is gone from these items and they gain some additional stats elsewhere to compensate. All Swan Spear lost its pen but gained 15 strength but a 50 gold cost increase. It still has the flat penetration passive. The Crusher lost its pen but gained 15 strength as well as 5 cooldown rate. Brawler's Ruin lost its pen but gained 15 strength and a 50 gold cost increase. Heartseeker lost its pen but gained 20 strength and 100 mana. Divine Ruin lost its pen but gained 20 intelligence. Spear of Desolation lost its pen but gained 15 intelligence, and the passive cooldown reduction is now 3 seconds for basic and 10 seconds for ultimate on kill, compared to 1 and 5 seconds before. Necronomicon lost its pen but gained 300 mana, 5 mana regen, 4 intelligence and 100 gold cost reduction. Doomorb lost its pen but gained 25 intelligence, 50 mana, a 150 gold cost reduction, and the passive no longer provides movement speed, but the passive now stacks 8 intelligence versus 4 before. And finally, for the percent pen changes, Rodder Tahuti lost its pen but gained 20 intelligence, 50 mana, and the passive intelligence bonus has gone up from 20% to 25%. Moving into more general item changes to the patch though aside from pen. First up, Gauntlet of Thebes no longer gives protections but gives max health from stacking instead. The item now has a total of 1000 max health at full stacks. Clumsy mentioned specifically that they wanted to differentiate Thebes from Prophetic a little bit so that 1 stacks health and 1 stacks pros. Clumsy did a bit of a monologue here too, basically giving an example of why they think this item specialization is better for the game than items being generically good in every situation. For example, if your support decides to build Thebes early, the enemy ADC might get kin size early in their build to counter that, but that then means you, as the jungler, can target that ADC more because the Kins is doing nothing against you compared to if they went crit or a tier thing or something like that, which I thought was some pretty interesting insight. Moving on though, Gemma Focus is getting a change with a 150 gold cost reduction, 10 more base intelligence, but the passive no longer grants intelligence. Instead, it gives 4% movement speed per stack instead of 2% before. Teko Kagi is getting similar changes with the CDR on its passive stacks being removed, but the movement speed going up from 2% to 4%. These two effects are also now named, so they won't stack with each other anymore. Mystical Mail is getting some changes as well. It will now deal up to 50% bonus damage to close range enemies and up to 50% reduced damage at max range. Phoenix Feather is also getting a change. It gets 25 health and a 5 magical prop reduction, but the active effect now pulses 3 times instead of once, and the cooldown is dramatically lowered from 180 seconds to 120. Rage is getting a very small change as well. It now requires 5 stacks instead of 4, but has the same crit chance total. Shifter's Shield is losing its mana and gaining 100 health, definitely a trade in its favor considering mana is a fake stat in Smite 2 outside of the first 10 minutes. Sunbeam Bow is getting a similar change to Executioner where it now provides strength or intelligence based on your build. The attack speed also went down from 12% to 10%, and the mana regen has been removed from the item. However, the active effect scaling is now 30% basic attack damage compared to 20% before. Void Shield and Stone are getting the same change as Mystical Mail where they now scale with distance. They are up to 50% more effective at point blank and up to 50% less effective at max range, so 15% reduction up close, scaling down to a 5% reduction at max range. Bluestone Brooch is getting a nerf, decreasing the base damage from 120 to 100, and they also fixed an issue where subsequent hits from Bluestone were doing 2/3 damage instead of 1/2, which was intended, so that's a big nerf in itself. And finally for items, Bumper Spear is also getting a 5% attack speed reduction. Moving into god balance for OB9 though. First up, Athena is getting some buffs with her taunts cooldown going from 18 seconds to 16, and her ultimate now scales down from 120 seconds to 100 seconds, where it was just 120 flat before. Bellona is getting some buffs with Scourge's protection scaling going up from 5% to 10%, and her ultimate getting some more base damage, more so in the early ranks of the ability. Nemesis dash is getting 10 more base damage at all ranks, so 20 total if you hit both the dashes, and her center damage on the 2 is getting 10% more strength scaling. Ra's ultimate true damage is going up from 5% max health to 8%. Rama is getting a shift where his aspect is being nerfed, with his max slow stacks on Astral Strike going down from 3 to 2, and the slow duration going down from 1.5 seconds to 1 second. But non-aspect Rama's bonus strength scaling on the 1 is going up from 10% to 15%. Susano is getting some small buffs with his 2's base damage and his ult's base damage both going up a little bit. Thanatos is getting some buffs with his minion healing on kill going up from 8.5% max health to 10%, Death Size cooldown going down from 11 seconds to 10 seconds, and Soul Reap's silence duration is being increased from 0.75 seconds to 1 second. And finally, for God Balance, Ymir's Frostbite will now apply a 10% attack speed debuff to affected enemies. Clumsy mentioned specifically that there aren't that many or any nerfs in a lot of main patches, because most of the nerfs they do are in hotfixes unless they have a specific reason not to nerf in a hotfix and wait for the main patch. That's why you often see buffs in main patches and not nerfs. Mulan was asked about once again in terms of buffs, and Kilgun said that based on their statistics, Mulan is pretty fine right now and she doesn't really need buffs or nerfs. Someone asked about how many items are becoming heavily focused on their actives and passives, and are they considering adding more stat stick items to the game? And they said yes, they will consider that, but they want to be careful with how many they add, because it can quickly become that stat sticks are the best way to play the game, and that's just less interesting than playing around passives or actives. Someone asked if Aspect Kali's auto attacks going through walls on the PCS is intended, and they said definitely not. That's a bug that will be fixed for the launch of OB9. Someone asked about Loki Aspect and if it will get any buffs or a rework, and they said they mostly want to focus right now on getting aspects out for the gods that don't have them compared to reworking old aspects, but they do agree that some old aspects could use another look and potential rework. There was a question about the ranked rewards and if your current rank applies to the frame or only your rank in the next split, and they said the OB9 will be the soft reset, but the rewards will only go out in OB10. However, your current rank will count for the rewards. They're just delayed by one patch due to time constraints. Someone asked if they would consider adding passive anti-heal to Linnean Bow, and they said probably not, as they think Brawlers fills that niche fairly well and does work on basic attacks if you want consistent anti-heal. Someone asked how Guan Yu is performing in the flash test, and they said they generally don't get amazing balance data on the flash test due to low player count. They also get feedback on feels and bugs from flash tests. But Clumsy did mention that maybe the int scaling on the aspect could go down to make it more supportive and less just generically good always. And finally, someone asked if they would add any completely enclosed areas of the map, and Kilgun said it's interesting and did exist for the Fire Giant Pit in Alpha Smite 1, but it causes a lot of weird issues, like for Spectator, for flying abilities, for jumps, stuff like that will be really hard to work around and make it look good and interact sensibly with various abilities. But that's everything discussed on today's Titan Talk. A full look at the item balance that we got a peek into on the flash test, as well as God balance and Q&A. Let me know your own thoughts down below on the balance changes, and I'll catch you guys for another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.